Inside the Roxcorp Media building in New York, the owner, Michael Roscoe, talks to his son, Parker. Their interaction shows a bit of bad blood between them, but they soon agree to meet for lunch later that day. Unknown to them, a strange individual has entered the building and has messed with the elevator using an unknown device. Michael, ignorant of this, enters the elevator and falls to his death. Meanwhile, in a school in London, our MC, Alex, is invited to a party by his best friend, Tom. While discussing how to get there, the teacher seizes Tom's phone. After school hours, Alex shows off his talent for theft and recovers the phone from the teacher's locker, only to get caught by the teacher and reported to his uncle, Ian. As punishment, his uncle grounds him and forbids him from going to the party. At home, Alex begs Jack, the housekeeper, to convince his uncle, but she refuses.
I'm gonna speak of this again.
That night, during dinner, Ian watches the news airing about Roxcorp's owner's death. Strangely, the sight of Parker catches Alex's eye, and he tells Ian about him. Apparently, Parker once pulled a prank on his father and was sent to Point Blanc, a school for troubled teenagers. Ian appreciates his story and heads over to his study. There, Jack calls his friend Martin and asks him to find out something for him in Moscow. Then, Jack comes inside and asks her to quit her job as their housekeeper. According to her, the plan was to work for him till she finished her education. Now that she's done, their deal is over. A few minutes later, Alex complains to Tom about being grounded, but Ian enters his room and tells him he's stepping out for a while. Seizing the opportunity swings open. Alex sneaks out and goes to the party with Tom. While he fools around at the party, his uncle meets with Martin, and they both head to a warehouse for investigation. There, Martin betrays Ian, and the same man who had messed with the elevator at Roxcorp appears. Ian recognizes him as Yasin and asks about his involvement in his investigation. However, Yasin apologizes to him and then shoots him. To cover up the crime, he also shoots Martin in the arm and gives him a cover story for the investigation. After the party, Alex goes home, but he is welcomed with the news of his uncle's death. The police claim he was involved in an accident while driving over the speed limit, but Alex doesn't believe that and asks to see his uncle's body. The police tell him that the body is too damaged, and it's not a good idea for him to see his uncle in such a state. Whereas Ian's body is being examined by his colleagues from work. Their boss, Alan Blunt, comes in and asks Crawley and Miss Jones about the situation. They inform him about the gun used on Ian, and also Martin being a witness to his death. Blunt decides to speak with Martin, and tells the rest to console Ian's family. After this, he interrogates Martin about Ian's death, but Martin gives him the cover story concocted earlier by Yasin. This makes Blunt suspicious, but he leads Martin into thinking he believes him. The next day, Ms. Jones and Crawley go over to express their condolences, but Alex feels something is wrong. Before they leave, he tells them about Point Blanc, and how Ian was investigating the school. Ms. Jones gets spooked a bit, but tells him they'll look into it. After their departure, Alex continues to search for clues, by calling hospitals where his uncle could have been brought in. However, none of the hospitals have had a car accident victim with his uncle's name. Soon, Tom arrives and joins the investigation. In the end, they discover Ian's last location and head over to the place with their bikes. Back at the agency, Ms. Jones tells Blunt about her investigation into Ian and Michael Roscoe's deaths. Through Alex, she was able to realize that the common factor between the two is a school called Point Blanc. Meanwhile, Alex and Tom arrive at Ian's last location, but they find some people cleaning up the area. Alex records them on his phone when he gets attacked by someone. He easily beats up the attacker, and Tom basically had to drag him away from breaking the attacker's jaw. Afterwards, he tells Tom to go home, while he follows another car coming out of the place on his bike. He stays with the car until it enters another space. Just before the gates and doors close, Alex jumps in. However, he gets caught by the driver, who turns out to be Agent Crawley, one of Ian's colleagues. Afterward, Crawley calms him down and takes him inside for a quick chat. Inside, Blunt finds Alex's dedication and skill very impressive and decides to talk to him. There, he tells Alex that Ian, whom he merely thought was a banker, was actually a field agent for the British intelligence agency. He then asks Alex for his help in solving Ian's case, but Alex blames him for Ian's death and tells them to piss off. He walks out of the room, angrily, and goes home. The next day, Alex shares his grief with Jack, but things soon take a strange turn. Immigration officers barge in and ask for Jack's visa. They check her documents and claim that they're fake, and threaten to deport her. Additionally, child services also come in and try to take Alex to a foster home. Knowing who is behind all these, Alex calls Blunt and accepts the job. Like magic, the immigration and child service employees get a call and are forced to back off.
They can take you away. I'll be right back.
Afterward, Alex goes outside and sees Blunt already waiting for him in a car. He enters the car with him, and they drive off. Soon, they arrive at the bank, and Ms. Jones explains certain things to Alex. Based on their research, 2 deaths, including that of Michael Roscoe, are related to Point Blanc. The second death is of Gregory Sarenkov, whose kid, Stepan, also used to attend Point Blanc. Now they want him to attend that same school and report back to them any suspicious activities he finds out. Fueled by the zeal to find out why his uncle had died, Alex accepts the job. The next day, Alex prepares to go to school, but Jack questions him about the evening before. Alex doesn't give her a direct answer, and Jack doesn't back down. She later allows him to leave and shifts the conversation to when he comes back from school. At school, Alex's day kicks off with Tom quizzing him about their previous escapade. Alex tries to get him to back off, but suddenly, his crush approaches him and commends him for coming to school, despite the tragedy he had just gone through. Meanwhile, at the agency, Agent Crawley brings over the ballistics of the gun used on Ian, and Ms. Jones examines it. However, the result matches what Martin had told them, but based on her remarkable experience, she feels that it might be a ploy to get them off track. She continues to work on Alex's cover story, but suddenly stops to think about Blunt's goal in recruiting a teenager as an agent. Blunt, however, meets with David Friend, who is a well-known global tycoon, in an attempt to piece together the perfect cover for Alex. Back in Alex's school, a man claiming to be a grief counselor meets with Alex. He says his name is Daniels, and tells Alex that Blunt is not to be trusted. However, Alex doesn't buy what he's selling, and tries to leave. Before leaving, he gives Alex one final piece of advice, and tells him to be careful of whatever Blunt tells him to do. Alex leaves the room, and hangs out with Tom. Outside, Alex makes plans to watch movies with Tom after school hours, but after Tom leaves, he makes a call to inquire if Daniels is who he says he is. At the agency, Blunt tells Miss Jones about David Friend, a food production tycoon worth $150 billion, and how he intends to send Alex to Point Blanc as Friend's troubled son. However, he senses Miss Jones's disapproval of his methods, and tells her to act as Alex's handler. Even though she feels it's a dangerous mission for a teenager, Ms. Jones agrees to do it. That day, after school, Alex gets into an accident on his bike and gets kidnapped by some men in masks. They take him to a strange room, where a man asks him questions about his uncle's real job and Point Blanc. However, Alex doesn't tell him what he wants to hear. As a result of this, they send him into another room and start torturing him with loud music. Alex responds by singing loudly as well, shocking his kidnappers, who are watching his perseverance in awe. Soon, a call from Jack comes in, and one of the abductors tells her boss that it's the third time she called. It turns out that Tom had informed Jack of Alex's failure to come over as planned, and in an effort to find out where he is, she's been blowing off his phone. After failing to get a response, she forces Tom to tell her the password to Alex's laptop. She checks it and finds out what he's been hiding. She then proceeds to the bank and meets with Miss Jones. She threatens to go public with what she knows unless they provide Alex's whereabouts. Strangely, Ms. Jones is surprised to hear that Alex isn't with her. Meanwhile, Alex is holding his own against the abductors, and all their attempts to get him to break fail. Frustrated by his strong-mindedness, they change their method and drench Alex with water. However, that method doesn't sit well with some of them, so they convince their boss to call it off. Unknown to them, Alex had stolen a pin from one of the files they questioned him with and picked his cuff with it. With that, he escapes from the room, and the abductors chase after him. Soon he sees an opening and makes a break for it. However, he's stopped by a car driven by Daniels. Daniels tries to take him, but Alex doesn't follow him. Luckily, Miss Jones arrives in time and calls the whole thing off. She also calls Daniels by his real name, Smithers, and everything adds up for Alex. It has all been a test orchestrated by Blunt. Ms. Jones takes Alex home and heads back to the agency. She crashes out on Blunt, but he apologizes, claiming they needed to be sure about Alex. He then emphasizes that the mission should remain between all of them in the room. Back in Alex's home, Jack treats his wounds and tells him how out of line the agents are. She advises him to back out, but Alex doesn't heed. He claims he needs to set things straight, not just for him, but for his uncle as well. In an unknown location, Martin meets with Yasin and tells him all about the agency's plan. According to him, the agency buys the story they sold them with the gun ballistics. There has been no mention of Point Blanc ever since. Happy to hear this, Yasin calls Martin a good man and promises that he'll be rewarded for his loyalty. Meanwhile, in France, the person in charge of Point Blanc, Dr. Greif, stares through the window of his office after reading the file of Alex's friend, their incoming student. He tells his subordinate, Dean Stellenbosch, that the student will be the final puzzle piece that will help them achieve their true goal. The next day, the intelligence agency received a message from the dean of Point Blanc, Eva Stellenbosch, asking to speak with Alex before his admission. To protect Alex from her, Ms. Jones goes over to his house to quiz him. Alex, with his big brain, passed with flying colors. However, he needs to look the part, so Ms. Jones tells Jack to make him look like a delinquent. Jack accepts the job and takes Alex to get a haircut. The next day of school, Tom makes fun of his haircut and calls him a douche. However, his douchey appearance catches the attention of Alex's crush, since girls like bad boys. She invites them both for a movie night, and they promise to show up, because who wouldn't want to watch movies with a pretty girl? On the way home, Alex gets a message and informs Tom that he needs to dip. Tom confronts him for being secretive, but Alex manages to get him off it. Afterwards, he meets with Miss Jones and Smithers, who tell him that Stellenbosch will arrive that weekend. Smithers also gives him the list of students in the school, but emphasizes making friends with Kira because she's a skilled hacker. He also gives him an MP3 player, which will come in handy when he's inside the school walls. Sad news is, Alex now has to move into the friend's estate to prepare for Stellenbosch, meaning no movie night with hot chicks.
Up 2 places on the Forbes list.
At the estate, he meets his pretend parents, David Friend and his wife, Caroline. He has dinner with them, but after a few conversations, he realizes being rich doesn't equate to being happy. That night in his room, he sends Tom a text that cancels their initial plans. Tom sees this and immediately gets upset. Meanwhile, at the agency, Agent Crawler tells Blunt and Jones that Martin has been consistent with his version of what happened to Ian. This makes Blunt conclude that Martin has either set the whole thing up or he's telling the truth. He then tells Crawler to keep an eye on him. The next day at the friend's estate, David teaches Alex how to shoot, and also tells him not to trust Alan Blunt. Meanwhile, Fiona, his daughter, arrives in a bit of rage and enters the mansion. Knowing his daughter's irrational attitude, David tells her about the arrival of her new brother and begs her to play along. Tom, on the other hand, goes to Alex's house but meets only Jack. She tries to patronize him, but he knows her words are bollocks. Seeing how frustrated he is, Jack decides to tell him the whole truth about Alex and where he is.
Born in Monaco.
Later that day, Alex runs into Fiona at the pool. She flaunts her body at him and also teases him at dinner. However, Alex isn't surprised by her advances and just keeps to his reason for being there. After dinner, a mysterious pizza boy comes to the house, and he turns out to be Tom. Alex lets him in and finally tells him the whole truth. Tom forgives him for lying and tells him to be careful with the agents. He then leaves the mansion, and on his way, he almost gets run over by some maniacs in a vehicle. It turns out to be Fiona's boyfriend, Rafe, and his friends. Fiona comes out to greet them, and Alex sees it through the window. Curious, he goes down to meet with them as well. Fiona introduces him as one of her father's charity guests, and Alex doesn't take offense. He converses with Rafe and his friends, like they're all buddies from the old town. Rafe even invites him for a walk around the estate the next day. Not sensing any enmity from them, Alex accepts his offer and leaves them to continue their business. Back at the agency, Agent Crawler watches Martin as he works tirelessly, trying to prove his ballistics result theory. After a while, he goes over to Martin and tells him to go home. Martin doesn't want to, but Crawler explains that the investigation into Ian's death has been suspended. Martin is surprised by this, but doesn't argue it, since it's also good news for him. The next day, Alex has breakfast with the family, including Rafe and his friends. There, Rafe tells him they'll be going shooting and asks to meet at the hunting spot later. A few moments later, Alex keeps to time, but the others don't. Suddenly he hears gunshots flying toward him and quickly takes cover. He then hears Rafe and the others calling out to him, holding a rifle. He devises a plan and hides carefully in the bushes. Then he catches the fools off guard and snatches Rafe's gun. They claim they're just playing around, but Alex knows they're not. He angrily throws the rifle into the bushes and walks away. Back at the mansion, Ms. Stellenbosch arrives, and the friends welcome her. Ms. Jones and Smithers are also watching Alex from a monitor as Ms. Stellenbosch approaches him. During the conversation, Alex puts up the troubled teenager persona and convinces Stellenbosch. She approves his admission and takes him away. However, Fiona rushes down into the mansion angrily, trying to ruin the whole thing. Luckily, an agent posing as a housekeeper silences her and drags her out of the way. With all that over, Alex arrives at Point Blanc in a helicopter.
Welcome to your new home, Alex.
And as he walks in, Mr. Greif stares at him through the window. Inside the school, Stellenbosch conducts searches for belongings and confiscates his phone. However, the MP3 player is allowed in, and Alex smirks at their ignorance. Also, he is required to wear a uniform like a prisoner before going to class. He arrives in a class session by Dr. Baxter, and Stellenbosch introduces him to the students. Sasha, Arash, Laura, James, and Kira also do the same.
Where are the others?
In another location, Martin sends a message to Yasin and later meets him in a parking lot. There, he tells Yasin that the agency has called off the investigation. However, being a man of extreme caution, Yasin calls his handler and tells her that they might have a problem. Back in Point Blanc, Alex bonds with Laura and James as they take him on a tour around the school. Unknown to him, Sasha and Arash are also discussing him in their own space. During the tour, they tell him about the second floor, which is completely blocked off from the other areas of the school. Apparently, there are different conspiracy theories surrounding the place. Some believe it's a place where hazardous chemicals are kept, while others believe otherwise. Afterwards, they take him to a room where Dr. Grafe, the person in charge of the school, holds his classes, and he sees Kyra. He tries to talk to her, but she isn't welcoming. Some minutes later, Alex takes a medical, like a newly transferred football player, and after being cleared, he goes to have dinner with his new friends. However, he notices Sarah and Ararash's strange behavior, how they are always in sync, like demons from a horror movie. However, he pays them no heed, and after dinner, he goes to wash the dishes with Kira. He tries to liven the mood, and mistakenly divulges something from his past. When Kira asks about it, he cleverly avoids it and connects his MP3 player to the speaker. Music starts playing, and soon enough, Laura and James join in on the fun. In the end, they mess up the kitchen, forcing Stellenbosch to come in and scold them. She spares Kira because she wasn't involved, and takes Alex to Dr. Greif's office. There, Greif tells Alex the reason for his being at the school, but his hippie ideology sounds bogus to Alex, and he rudely addresses Greif. As a result of this behavior, Stellenbosch hits him. He claims they're not allowed to hit him, but she just scoffs in his face. They send him to his room, and on his way back, he stares at the second floor again. At the student quarters, James consoles him for getting hit, while Alex asks him some questions about the school. However, their conversation gets interrupted by Stellenbosch, who forces both of them into bed. After she leaves, Alex tries to contact the agency using the MP3 player, but it doesn't appear to be jammed. Frustrated, he lies back in bed, while the door to his room locks automatically. Meanwhile, at the agency, Martin tries to get access to some of Ian's information, but to his surprise, he finds out that information regarding his family has been locked away. The next day, Jack approaches Ms. Jones and asks for information about Alex's whereabouts. However, Ms. Jones insists that the mission is classified. She then proceeds to ask Jack about Ian's last phone call before his death. Jack explains what she heard that night, and Ms. Jones deduces that the person he called was Martin. Afterwards, she reports her findings to Crawley and Blunt, to which Blunt instructs Martin to be watched closely, so they can find out who's pulling his strings. Back at the academy, Dr. Greif gives his lecture to his students. His lecture somehow matches with Hitler's ideology of wiping out 99% of the world and leaving the remaining 1% to thrive. However, the lecture gets interrupted by Laura's cough, and he asks her to go to the infirmary. Strangely, Laura is reluctant, but she has no other choice. After the lecture, Alex talks to James and finds out his family is into weapons distribution. Instinctively, Alex finds it weird that the school has only handpicked children from global industries and not pop stars or royalty. But even weirder is Sasha and Arash, playing table tennis in perfect harmony. Meanwhile, Blunt's instruction to survey Martin's movement takes effect, and cameras are set in his home. Unknown to them, their activities are also being watched by Yasin. Martin, on the other hand, visits Jack and tries to find out what she knows. Believing he's Ian's friend, Jack tells him about Alex and asks if he's alright. Suddenly, she gets a call from Ms. Jones, telling her not to divulge any information to Martin, but it was too late. Martin leaves the house with a picture of Alex with him and goes to a locker. He takes a bit of cash and tries to dip, but he is double-crossed by Yasin. He tries to explain his side of things, but Yasin stabs him and takes the picture from him. On the other hand, Alex watches a movie with the students at Point Blanc. During the movie, Sasha tries to seduce him and even kisses him, but to her surprise, Alex rejects her, and she storms off angrily. After the movie, Alex tries to contact the agency again, but the player doesn't do the job. Soon, Stellenbosch comes into his room, but he doesn't entertain her presence. He goes to brush his teeth after her departure, and suddenly collapses. As he loses consciousness, he feels himself getting dragged to a strange room. and also sees blurry images of people in masks shining light into his face. The next day, Alex wakes up in his room and treats the whole experience as a weird dream. Unknown to him, there's a camera placed behind his mirror, watching his every move. While having breakfast with James, he tells him about the weird dream he had. Surprisingly, Kira also recounts having the same dream, and so does James. This puzzles them, but Laura's entrance takes their minds off it for a bit. James tries his usual jokes on Laura, but she seems different. She acts like Sarah and Arash, and even goes over to their table to eat. James vents out his frustration over Laura's acting like an NPC and storms out of the room. Meanwhile, Blunt and his agents have a meeting concerning Martin's death. Based on their investigation, Point Blanc made a significant effort to turn Martin against them, and now they must find out the reason for it. Far away from there, Yasin is also making progress with the photo he took from Martin. He checks through the database and finally finds the school Tom attends. Consequently, he goes over to the school, posing as a parent, and bumps into Tom. He recognizes him from the photo, but the two don't share a word. Back in Point Blanc, James panics about ending up like Laura and devises a plan to escape with Alex and Kira. However, they'll need access to the door codes. Alex asks if Kira can hack into the system, but she's surprised he knows about her skills. She tells him she'll need to get into Greif's office to be able to do that, and he promises to get her in. Afterwards, Kira presses him to start telling the truth, but he feigns ignorance.
There you go again.
Fortunately for the agency, their investigation into Martin yields fruit, as Smithers finds his slush fund and a strange number. They decide to call the number, and the receiver asks for the caller's identity. Smithers says Martin's name using an AI voice generator, but the call gets disconnected afterwards. They dial the number again, but this time, it doesn't go through. Realizing they've been played, the crew thinks about their next course of action. Meanwhile, Alex creates a plan to get into Greif's apartment using pencil lead. He sprays the lead on the keypad, and when Greif comes over to press the code, he goes over to check which numbers are lighter. The result gives them 3 numbers, 1, 8, and 9. However, the code should be 4 numbers, meaning Greif repeated 1. But based on Greif's teachings and quotes, Alex thinks that he might be a Nazi. Hence, the code will be 1889, which signifies Hitler's year of birth. In another location, Yasin receives a call from his handler, telling him they've been compromised. Dr. Greif also receives a similar call, and he is informed that there is an update on their security protocols. Afterwards, Greif steps out with Stellenbosch, creating room for Alex and Kira to sneak into his office. Alex inputs the code and enters with Kira, while James keeps watch outside. Kira successfully changes the security codes of the doors, but Alex asks her to search for his uncle's name. The search doesn't give any results, and Alex tries to leave. However, Kira tries to get help from outside, using the computer. Meanwhile, Greif commends Dr. Baxter on his excellent work with the students, but the doctor seems to want public recognition. This doesn't sit well with Greif, and he plots with Stellenbosch to get rid of him. Whereas in his office, Kira is frustrated that her plan isn't working, but later figures out that the computer uses a designated slot card before it can access the internet. Suddenly, they hear loud music outside, which is a signal from James. They quickly rush out of the office, while James gets caught and scolded by Stellenbosch and Greif. Greif returns to his office, only to find Yasin already there. Surprised by his visit, Greif asks for the purpose, and Yasin shows him a picture of Alex and Tom. He claims that if he wants them handled, he should contact his handler. After this, Yasin runs into Alex somewhere inside the building. They exchange a few words, but Alex feels uneasy around him. Back at the agency, Blunt watches Parker's speech about taking over powerful organizations and tells Ms. Jones he needs to visit Parker. Not long afterwards, he arrives at Parker's location in England and tells him about the call he had with his father the day he died. He then proceeds to ask about Point Blanc, but Parker's assistant, Langham, shuts him down. Blunt senses that, as his cue to leave, and bids Parker farewell. However, he calls Crawler and tells him to keep an eye on Parker.
One for the less than 0.
At Point Blanc, James tries to steal the keys to the snowmobiles and creates a distraction using a fake fire alarm. He takes the keys and tries to get out, but he gets caught by Stellenbosch. She takes him to a room, but Alex follows them. After a while, he enters the room as well, but doesn't find anyone inside. He rushes over to Kira and tells her about it. Together, they devise a plan to find out the truth. During nights out, Alex puts a coin inside his room door, which prevents it from locking. After a few minutes, he opens the door and sees Kira already waiting for him. They both enter the room and find a secret passage hidden behind a mirror. The passage leads them to the second floor, which is presumed to be out of bounds. While snooping around, they find replicas of their rooms and a camera as well. Unknown to them, a strange person is watching. Alex and Kira decide to leave, but they hear Grafe and Stellenbosch talking about tying up loose ends. They go towards the sound of their voices, and soon witness Dr. Baxter get dropped by Grafe. After dealing with Baxter, he tells Stellenbosch to take care of Kira next, and this sends chills down Kira's spine. The next day, Alex talks with Kira about what they heard the other night, but she seems too freaked out to want to talk about it. Just then, James walks in and starts acting similarly to Sasha, Arash, and Laura. This annoys Kira even more, and she leaves the room. Meanwhile, at Grafe's office, the photo he received from Yasin is giving him a headache because, according to Stellenbosch, she didn't come across Tom when she looked into Alex. However, he asks her to find out more, and also brings Kira to his office later in the day. Kira, by the way, is distraught, and soon vents out on Alex. She tells him she needs to escape, or else he'll end up like the rest. However, Alex refuses to escape with her, saying he needs to find out what has been done to the students.
You're no use to me.
Back in London, Tom receives a call from a mystery caller and rushes out of school. He ends up going to a branch of Roscorp Media in England and takes a selfie before going in. While that's happening, Alex argues with Kira after their class with Stellenbosch and tries to convince her not to escape before he finds the answers he seeks. But Kira doesn't listen and also refuses to tell him her plans. That evening, Alex sneaks into the basement in search of answers and enters a lab with green light. He snoops around and finds a file labeled Project Gemini, while memories of him being in that room rush through his brain. He then checks the monitor and finds files containing models of a face peculiar to each student. Switching back to Roscorp Media, Tom meets Parker and his assistant, Langham, for an interview. He thinks he's about to be given a job, but Parker mentions Alex as a person of interest. Tom walks into the trap like a dummy and calls Alex by his real last name. Soon after, his brain clicks, and he realizes he's cooked. He then tries to leave, but sadly, Parker doesn't let that happen. Back in Point Blanc, Stellenbosch looks everywhere for Kira and instructs the robotic students to do the same. Unknown to them, Kira has already sneaked outside and walked through the ice. Alex, on the other hand, is still snooping around, acting like James Bond. Just then, he comes across a cage containing the real students, including Parker Roscoe and Stepan Serenkov. Laura and James are happy to see Alex, and they ask him to get them out. It turns out that Grafe made copies of his students and kept the originals locked up. When the fakes get really good at imitating the originals, he sends them back to their families to take over their lives. Sadly, Grafe has gotten information from Parker that Alex isn't who he says he is. In Tom's phone, Parker finds a video about Alex being a spy and sends it to Grafe. With that, he orders Stellenbosch to find Alex and capture him. Also, news about Kira's escape reaches them, and he sends his guards to go after her on snowmobiles. Meanwhile, Alex is still trying to convince the caged students that running away will get them killed. He tells them to be patient while he gets them help from outside, but he is ambushed by Greif and Stellenbosch, who reveal his real identity as Alex Rider. Meanwhile, news of Tom's absence from school reaches Jack, and she calls him to find out where he is. Sadly, Parker's with his phone and doesn't pick up. Apparently, he told people at school that he'd be hanging out with Alex. But the Alex in question is getting strapped to a table a million miles away from England. He confronts Greif about Project Gemini and asks why he's doing it. Sadly, instead of answers, he gets a truth serum injected into his bloodstream. Soon the serum takes effect, but Alex fights it and doesn't tell the truth. He asks Greif about Ian and why he had him killed. Surprisingly, Greif doesn't know about Ian. This annoys Alex, and he starts singing loudly as a way of fighting the serum. Greif gives up and leaves the room with Stellenbosch. He asks about Kira and where she might go if she manages to escape. Stellenbosch replies that she'll likely go to her parents, and a few moments later, Greif calls his handler, ordering to get Kira's parents murdered. Meanwhile, the movements of the guards outside have tipped off Ms. Jones and Smithers in the agency. Just then, she gets a call from Jack, informing her about Tom's disappearance. However, at Point Blanc, Kira comes back to save Alex. She unties him, but asks for the truth about him. Alex gets defensive and calls her fake Kira, but Kira proves she isn't fake by telling him about the memories they share. Finally, Alex believes her and tells her he's just a dunce pretending to be a rich kid. Back at Roscorp, Parker plans to dispose of Tom, while Langham goes outside to keep watch. However, Parker gets busted by agents before he can do anything, while Langham gets followed by Yasin. After getting saved, Tom tells them about his phone and how Alex has been compromised. They quickly place a call to Ms. Jones and inform her of Alex's situation. She calls for a helicopter immediately, and even though she can't authorize a military operation, she claims Blunt can just fire her if she's wrong. Alex, on the other hand, decides to snowboard through the ice using an iron board, and after getting to safety, he'll bring back cavalry to save everyone. Kira believes his plan is dangerous, but Alex assures her he'll be fine. She then gives him a walkie-talkie with which they can communicate, and he leaves, promising to come back for her. Afterwards, he skates through the ice on his board, and the guards chase him on their snowmobiles. They fire several shots at him, but Bro is a 17-year-old with plot armor. However, he crashes into a ditch, and so does one of the riders. He hides so the other one doesn't see him, before escaping out of sight. Sadly, after getting on the road, he gets hit by a snow truck. After the accident, the truck driver calls the ambulance, and the guard riding the snowmobile witnesses it. He reports back to Stellenbosch, and he heads to the hospital to make sure Alex is incapacitated. There, she sees Alex's heart stop, while the doctors try to revive him with a defibrillator. Sadly, their efforts go to waste, and Stellenbosch reports back that Alex is dead. Kira, who's at the end of a walkie-walkie, the news of Alex's death, and loses all hope of escape. Unknown to her, it's all been a decoy, planned by Alex and Ms. Jones to throw Stellenbosch off. Stellenbosch returns to the academy and tells Greif the good news. Greif also tells her that he's put out a hit on Kira's parents as well, and their next plan is to send the clones back to their homes and kill the originals. Somewhere south of Point Blanc, Alex enters a tent with Miss Jones and asks her to let him join them to rescue his friends. However, she claims it's a dangerous job for a teenager and won't let him do it. Meanwhile, Parker is in the custody of the agency, and Smithers comes to Blunt with information about him. He claims that the Parker they see is a fake, who doesn't share the same DNA as his parents. Also, his body consists of scars that likely stem from repeated plastic surgery. Surprised by this, Blunt starts to wonder who the hell they have pretending to be Parker Roscoe. Back at the tent, the agents who kidnapped Alex back in London arrive. Their leader, Wolf, introduces the rest of his team members to Alex. However, based on their previous encounter, Alex doesn't welcome them. Just then, Blunt's call comes in, and Alex tells him about Project Gemini. It turns out Dr. Greif's area of study is cloning, and according to Alex, Greif made copies of himself and had Dr. Baxter change their looks to match the students in the school. Sadly, the original students are still captives, and they need to be saved. However, the guards are on high alert, having spooked Greif earlier. Blunt decides to find a way to calm Greif down, and decides to speak with Parker. Just before that, news of Langham's death reaches him, and he asks Crawley for some instructions for their next course of action. Meanwhile, Langham's killer, Yasin, calls his handler and tells her that Greif's operation has been compromised. They decide to do damage control L, and Yasin claims he has already begun. Back in the agency, Blunt and Smithers get Parker to talk so as to get his voice recording and create a replica using AI. After the interrogation, they place a call to Greif, and with Parker's voice, they convince him that Alex isn't a threat. With that, Greif calls off his dogs, creating an opportunity for Wolf and his team to infiltrate the school. Alex insists on joining them because he knows the layout, and Wolf tells him to stay with them always. Afterwards, they move out and soon arrive at the school entrance on skates. Alex contacts Kira immediately, and after getting his message, she quickly rushes off to get the others. By following Alex's knowledge of the pathway, Wolf and his comrades take out the guards manning the area. With those fodders out of the way, they break into the school through a window and continue moving. Ms. Jones instructs them to deal with the clones first, and Alex leads them to their rooms. One by one, the clones get bound and taped in the mouth, and after that, they proceed to Greif's office. Alex tells Wolf the passcode to the door, but they get shot at by some of the guards. They take out the guards, but Stellenbosch and Greif get spooked. Greif tells her to destroy all the evidence in the lab while he takes care of the ones on his computer. Worried about the clones, Stellenbosch asks what to do about them, but Greif says they're collateral damage. The gunfight continues, and Stellenbosch heads over to the lab. Surprisingly, she doesn't find any of the originals in their cell and gets frustrated. Meanwhile, Kira comes over to Alex amidst the gun battle and asks for his help. She leads him to the lab, but closes the door behind him. Suddenly, Stellenbosch attacks Alex from behind and knocks him to the ground. Soon, Wolf gets informed that Alex has been tricked by a possible clone and also instructs him to get Greif alive. Wolf enters Greif's office and captures him, while others go to find Alex. They come across fake Kira on the way and drop her to her knees. They then try to get Alex from the code they know doesn't work. Inside, Alex is getting his butt handed to him by Stellenbosch, while flammable chemicals flood the room. Soon a fire breaks out, and Alex hides himself in the corner of the room. Suddenly an explosion goes off and blows the room open. The agents outside enter the room and try to find Alex amidst the rubble. Luckily, he's alright, and they bring him out. Also, Kira and the originals are discovered by another agent and are brought to safety. With the innocents found and culprits apprehended, Ms. Jones deems the operation successful and even gets praised by Blunt. Soon the helicopter arrives, but Alex's behavior seems somewhat strange. Even when he gets home, he reacts coldly toward Jack and Tom. Believing it stems from the mission, Ms. Jones doesn't think much of it, and she heads back to the agency after dropping him off. Back in the agency, Blunt interrogates Greif and asks him to give up the people who killed Ian and Michael Roscoe. However, Greif refuses to tell him because he believes those people are much more dangerous than Blunt will ever be. Meanwhile, in Point Blanc, something strange happens as another Alex Rider emerges from the room where the explosion happened. Thank you for sticking to the end of my video. please do me the biggest favor by leaving a like, comment, and subscribe. And I hope to see you in the next video.